Well, hello everybody. I am really excited, as you've all figured out by the last few weeks communication, to be hosting a webinar with the incredible, incomparable Myrna Gillis, who is the CEO of Aqualitas. And Myrna is a very special person, I believe, in this industry, and she's somebody worth talking about and talking to. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk about Aqualitas. We're going to talk about all the things that you guys have asked about. And we're going to hear a little bit more about this company, this human, and everything that's going on. So Myrna is an entrepreneur. She's a lawyer. She's an innovator. And most importantly, I think she's a really good human. Her background is was for 25 years in disability law. So she has long been a champion of human rights. And she has carried that over into the cannabis space, I think, quite flawlessly. So without further ado, I introduced Myrna. And Myrna, I'm going to get you to start off telling us about Aqualitas.
Sure. Well, look, thank you for that very, very kind introduction as well. It's been very fortunate for me to make your acquaintance in this industry as well. And thank you for all the work that you do. Aqualitas, we are a licensed producer, and we're a cultivator, a processor. We also have a research license, so we do a lot of research in collaboration with others. We're located in Brooklyn, Nova Scotia, at the old Bowater Mercy plant, and I realize that not a lot of or everyone on the broadcast may be from Nova Scotia, but that was an area in Nova Scotia that had a lot of economic downturn with the closure of a pulp and paper mill. And so we located in that community, and that was a big part of our story to also participate in sort of some economic renewal. From a cultivation side, our company always wanted to be innovative and organic in our production methods. So that's some of the things that we do. Also, our company very much values diversity. We have a very diverse workforce, not only in relation to gender, but in relation to all sort of levels of diversity, and inclusive also of persons with disabilities. And when we got together as a company, it was a small group of folks in my boardroom here in Bedford, where I am right now as well. And it was really a group of people that were very driven at that time. Obviously, recreational wasn't even on the horizon. And this was people that were very committed to health and wellness, and wanted to do something in relation to cannabis. And so we formed Aqualitas with that in mind. But we also were guided, I think, in our principles of what we wanted to see this company be, not only in relation to the industry, but also our community here in Nova Scotia.
Well, I think you explained that beautifully, and I appreciate the context for where you're located. I think that's a part of the story that's really important, because those are your roots. And speaking of roots, we've heard a little bit about Aqualitas and how it started. I'd love for you to speak a little bit about your background, and also how that background led you to cannabis.
Sure. So, as you said, sort of in the beginning, my background was as a lawyer, and in particular, I was in what we refer to as the vulnerable services sector. So, the majority of my work was in the disability sector, but I also worked in other vulnerable populations, such as homelessness, shelters for women who were experiencing domestic violence and crisis, people that were dealing with addictions as well, and so that was the community that I served, and I worked in that area. And my connection to cannabis came through that as well. And so what I was seeing, I also represented individuals that were usually looking for disability insurance, so for related to their disability. And what I used to find with that is that if someone didn't return to work in my world within 2 years, very rarely did they ever return to work, and their disability might have been permanent. And I was getting calls, and from clients of mine, and they were saying, "Look, Myrna, I'm going back to work, or I'm going to try to go back to work full part time, or I'm transitioning back." And I'm like, "Well, what happened? What are you doing?" Because I hadn't seen anything sort of to move the needle in that regard prior in my practice, and it was people that were using medical cannabis, and so I was very intrigued by that. And I also followed it from a social justice perspective. I did follow the court cases. I was aware of them. And in my work, particularly in the residential settings, I also came across opportunities where cannabis was an issue, whether it was from a human rights perspective or in relation to some of the harm reduction. So for allowing people access to cannabis potentially, for example, in shelters, that or in and also if people were in group homes. And I had one particular situation where it was a youth, very young child that was in care, and whose parents wanted them to have access to medical cannabis. And so it was working through between the residents with the province around those issues to ensure access to cannabis for that child as well. So those were sort of my early sort of introductions, and I was very fascinated by it. And I know, sort of on a personal note, I was 2 years away from my 50th birthday. I had practiced, for almost 25 years. I thought, I want to do something more. I want to do something that's different. And I think I've done what I can do, in my profession, but there's something more out there. And part of that was also kind of a walk the walk moment for me, in that I always had some strong views about how I thought things could happen. And I wanted to see whether that could apply in reality in relation to how you do business, how you interact with the world, and how you can build something from nothing, in a brand new industry. And so that was sort of how I came to cannabis. But those were my inspirations in understanding what was so amazing about it. And I am, obviously a very passionate advocate for the individuals, but I'm also very passionate about the plant and about the science, and have done so much to educate myself about that over the last 7 or 8 years, and that's why I'm here.
That, a lot of people know that you and I speak, and that we're familiar. It really is no exaggeration to say that every time I speak to you or I hear you speak, there's something else that comes up that really just reminds me of the potential for good humans and good actors in this space. And, for me personally, and I know for so many people in this group, there are so many SheCann members and patients across the country, returning to work is something that we talk about a lot, and it is something that cannabis can give us back the opportunity to do. In my case, that is the case. And I just think about you, receiving that information, being present for those people as they return to work and they're sharing this story, and how you are putting those pieces together. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that you were able to, be present and hold space for something that still has a lot of stigma. So, it's not as logical as, yeah, great. I smoked weed and I went back to work, right? Like it's so many layers, and returning to work is a really emotional undertaking. So I think it just merits saying thank you. Thank you for holding space for all those people, and thank you for taking it beyond that and looking to do meaningful work with what you understand. And I guess, understanding your background and how you kind of got to the point where you said, like, let's see if I can, walk the walk on this. Do you have a personal connection to cannabis?
Well, I mean, I think every person, certainly in our company, has a connection to cannabis in some way, and it could be their own personal consumption, whether it's for wellness or spirituality or just for fun, and but for me, there's a couple of touch points. I think that one would absolutely be, I've seen the benefits for people in my own family who have benefited from the use of medical cannabis. I am a chronic insomniac, and so I certainly have benefited from the use of cannabis in relation to that. And we have done a lot of projects that are very focused in our research for for different types of disabilities. And we'll talk about that, I know, a little bit later. But one area that is very sort of dear to me is in relation to Alzheimer's research, and I would love to see an opportunity to participate in that on our level, because my mom had it, and it was one of these things where I said, I really wish that we were further along, than we are, because I think that one of the things that I have, sort of my two touch points for cannabis from a personal connection, I think, or what I think are important, and part of it's because of my background as an advocate, is the greatest amount of our responsibility, I think, is in relation to the cannabis use with children and with persons that are incompetent. And so that is generally the elderly, because as competent adults, you can make choices about your consumption of cannabis, but you don't necessarily have the opportunity to make those choices when you're an elderly person with a disability, or a child with a disability, and somebody has to educate and advocate for you to have access to cannabis. And so those two areas for me are particularly compelling, because I think that voice needs to be heard. And that's so anytime there's an opportunity to sort of advocate for and whether that's challenging the stigma, whether that's supporting research, or whether that's just being a 50+ lady who likes to talk, that has an audience, I'll take that and sort of have the opportunity to have a conversation around that. So for me, those are the things that are kind of near and dear from a personal level.
Thank you for sharing that. I think you're right. Everyone within Aquilitas, and I would say arguably a lot of people in this country, the majority of people now have some sort of connection to cannabis. Yeah. And your personal story is, I believe your personal story informs so much of the motivation behind why we do what we do. I know that your insomnia is justified, right? Like I know how hard you work, and I know how you never stop thinking about how you can be supportive and take things to a next level in a meaningful way. So I'm glad that you have cannabis to try and mitigate some of that, thoughtfulness.
Especially Aqualitas cannabis in particular.
Well, I am partial, and that's not biased. I mean, I want to make it clear to everyone, and I've said this before, that I approached you, and probably strong-armed you to some degree to do this with me, because I believe in you, and I believe in the company, and I also do believe in the cannabis. So if you were just a nice lady who did good work, that's one thing. But you're also a nice lady who's doing good work in a sustainable way and is growing really incredible medical cannabis. So that's a whole other ball of wax, and I'm excited to talk about some of that. And let's talk a little bit about the mission behind Aquilitas, because it isn't just another company, schlepping weed.
No, I mean, for us, so we again, our brand's sort of and mission, and when we did our own sort of, obviously every company should, if they don't, I mean, it is understanding what our cohesive values are, and certainly the promotion of wellness and advancing research and quality, and being also an honest broker, in all of this, because there's a lot of and I'm hesitant to use the word trust, but it does have some meaning, that we do what we say we're going to do, and we also we've always basically made sure that before we did something, that it was either doable or it was done, and we would sort of go forward with that. But sort of the thing about the company, we certainly valued the patient, we valued our employees, and we valued our environment around us. And so that's not just our community, but it's also just the physical environment around us. And so really those three legs on the stool were sort of the foundation of the company. And we said, how do we support all of those things? And so one of the things is how do you best support patients? We put thought into every element of it. And so it's how do we grow the best cannabis? Because first and foremost, you can dress anything up as much as you want, but at the end of the day, certainly from my perspective and my passion is for cannabis flower, because that is the starting point of everything. So you have beautiful flower, you'll have beautiful 2.0 products. But always start with, the healthy, and a beautiful flower is a flower that is allowed to express its full genetic potential. It is a flower that is able to be given the same environmental conditions again and again so it can express itself consistently. And it is the selection of products that have the best composition that we know on the information we have to date about what's good medically. And so it's not just CBD, it's also THC. It's not vilifying one element of the plant in favor of another. It is about that entourage. And so when we went into this, we said, well, okay, well, we knew we wanted to be organic, and we also know medical patients like organic. I mean, the data is there, and so that was one of the things that we valued how we were going to cultivate. And so we worked for years before we even had a cannabis license to perfect our growing. We tried our grow lights, we tried aquaponics, and we knew that there were elements of aquaponics that didn't work, but it was really cool. And why it was cool was because there were things about aquaponics, which is growing plants using fish nutrients. And so essentially what it is it's a combination of aquaculture and farming. And I like to go back, one of my cousins said to me when I told him I was getting into the cannabis business, and he's a finance guy in New York, and he said, well, you're going back to your family roots of farming and fishing. And I said, yeah, I am. I'm actually going back to my Nova Scotia roots, which are farming and fishing. And so this was kind of modernizing two, foundational industries in our country, and even in my own family. And so basically the fish provide nutrients to the plant. It's a symbiotic design. It's intended to use less water. There's no runoff. There's no pesticides. There's no synthetic fertilizers. And when you think about synthetic fertilizers, what a lot of people don't realize is that the three macronutrients that every plant needs to live, you need nitrates, and most of the synthetic fertilizers that are out there are really intense carbon extraction, oil, petroleum-based extraction to create that synthetic. We know that phosphorus is in one of the most geopolitically unstable areas of the world. Most of the world's phosphorus comes from Morocco. And so we were able to, and this is, I could go on all day, and I won't, I promise. But what's interesting about aquaponics is that we're able to have all of the macronutrients and the micronutrients present in the aquaponics system with virtually no supplementation at all. And what's exciting to us about this is that this not only has application for growing really healthy cannabis plants, because organic plants, they can uptake their nutrients, they have beneficial bacteria that allow them to grow really healthy, and healthy plants is the ultimate goal. But also, when you think about things like food security, you think about having a lower carbon footprint where you can grow, you can have fish and vegetables, in one location. That's pretty compelling. Now, our fish are koi. We love our koi. We have names for our koi and stories for our koi. So they will live out their life cycle in our system for 25 years. So we are just focusing on the plant side of it at this point, but the concept has many applications. So we dealt with the cultivation. So what I'm saying is we paid tribute to the plant. Then to our people, we paid tribute to the people in our company. We wanted to have diversity. We wanted to have a living wage. We wanted to have good benefits. We wanted to have participation in our community and in our company. We wanted our employees to have pride in coming to work and feeling valued in their workplace. And so we worked really hard on the people, element of it. And then our community. And so our community being where we're located, we were very mindful of the impact of not over-promising to that community. They were devastated by the loss of its primary industry. We were really careful in how we sort of laid out our story, and that we were going to be good neighbors for them in their community. And then our environment. We have, I'm going to say, probably the most beautiful site of any cannabis producer in the world. I'm putting it out there, I'm laying it down. But we're on the ocean. We are literally right on the Atlantic Ocean. When you have a drone shot, we have the ocean on both sides of our building and in front of it, and it is just stunningly beautiful. And so we wanted to also, make sure that we were taking care of that environment, our ocean environment, our waterways, and so when we picked our certification for our cultivation, we picked a certification that required sustainability. So we did an energy audit before we put one single, as they would say, nail in the wall. We said, what's the most efficient way we can preserve energy here? And we got the highest energy rebate in the province of Nova Scotia has ever awarded under their rebate program for the design that we put in to save energy, to preserve water, and also not to be putting effluent out into our waterways. So that's sort of the mission, I guess, to sort of hit on each leg of the stool, as they say, and it's really driven us all the way. And the other thing about a value-based business is that what you assess first in your team is that you have cohesive values, because you can always assign the seat in the bus, but you cannot impart, singularly a value proposition that people don't embrace in an authentic way. So we made sure that we had the right people on the bus, and then we do our best. It's not always perfect, but we do our best to have people, in the places they need to be, and feel that they have opportunity for growth, and also that they influence the success of the company.
Yeah, I mean, you dropped the mic there, right? You said you've got the most beautiful, the most beautiful location of any licensed producer or cannabis company in the world, and I'm going to take your word for it in hopes that one day, I make my way out there. It's very interesting to hear how much thought and time went into, really reinforcing these pillars. And I'd like to talk a little bit about, the production process. We've touched on the fact that it's aquaponics, but I think that, as patients, sometimes we really don't understand, where things go. We know that there's grows. We sometimes know how people grow, but we don't necessarily understand the process, or, potentially what thought and care is being put into each of those steps. So I'd love if you can kind of speak to that.
So the thing with organic production, so I'll talk about that in general, and then how we do it specifically. But organic production is you have to have, for it to be proper, and meet whatever your accredited certification is you have to have organic practices in relation to obviously your pesticides and fungicides and what you use on the plant. And so you're completely restricted. Like Health Canada has actually approved pesticides. So sometimes there's a misconception that there's nothing in your products out there at all. There are approved, pesticides that you can use. We can't, as an organic producer. There's only a couple of treatments that can be applied. Most of we would use mostly biologics, so nematodes and beneficial bugs and things like that in our process. And so that's one piece of organics is pesticides and fungicides. The second part is that you actually need to have something beneficial. Something has to be alive in the process, because when you think about hydroponics, this is a very sterile way to grow. You're using usually municipal water, and you're combining it with generally synthetic nutrients. Some people may use some organic nutrients, but most people don't. They're usually and so the reason that beneficial bacteria is important is that it breaks down the nutrients. This is the process that breaks down the nutrients. And the difference is that when you're breaking down, and so we have a double whammy with our process. And this is what I love about our process, is that not only is the soil having the beneficial in it, which is how most organic growers would use, our water is also alive. So we have living water and living soil coming together. And what that allows the plant to do is it really allows it full access to nutrients. And in a hydroponic system, what happens is you also have to flush the system because the plant can be locked to the nutrients that are being delivered to it. And if you can think of something coming at an intensity of 10, like you have your nutrients at an intensity of 10, and then they discharge down to a lower intensity as the plant has sort of kind of starting to lock up and feeling full, if you can use that kind of analogy. Whereas, an organic plant just gets to snack all day long. They're essentially, whenever they're hungry, they have access to the nutrients and they uptake those nutrients. And our system also is different in that it has two components to it in our design. We have a recirculating component, so that's where the symbiotic, the water come in and out, and then we also have a closed loop system, or sorry, a decoupled system where when it goes to the flower stage, that's where we just provide the fish water with its nutrient benefits that way, because the plant changes what it needs. It goes from needing nitrates, which is great in that recirculating, to needing some other things. And so you've got, say, pesticides, you've got the nutrient and the nutrient delivery and having the living organism. And why does this matter? Why does that matter to me? Well, it matters to you because what most people do know is they know what they like and they know what they don't like. And when you draw those lines in the sand and you figure out, okay, well, what is it? Do I like white ash? Yeah, if you smoke cannabis, and you like white ash. Well, do you like a nice even grease line, when it's burning? Well, all of that, there's a correlation between it being organic or not organic. It's completely flushed. You're not having any residual chemicals. You're not having any of those things. We are a small batch producer. That's part of our process. So our products are grown in very small batches. And why that matters is that it allows us to maintain really good environmental controls. So why do environmental controls matter? Well, I can grow in a 2 million square foot greenhouse, but boy, is it ever hard to control the environmental conditions. But if I grow in a 3,000 square foot or 4,000 square foot room, I can pretty much dial in my temperature, my airflow, my humidity, all of the variables to give you consistency with the plant. So I've sort of, that the organic sort of helps the look and feel and touch and experience with the plant. It also, terpene profiles, like we've tested this. So this is not me saying, we know that the genetics that we have, when we've grown them hydroponically, we've grown them organically, and we've grown them aquaponically, and we've compared them and how they do for this very reason. And so the cannabinoid expression in an organic plant in our facility is much better. We have higher potency, we have higher terpene profiles, and we have much better crystal formulation on the bud of the plant. We have much better density on the plant compared to those other things. So it matters in how you experience the plant, but then the environment being smaller, it matters to the quality of the plant. So what the process allows you to also have is that when we would harvest our rooms, because of the sanitation and the environmental controls, we meet microbial counts. So we're not irradiating our product. Now, I'm not going to say we've never done an e-beam or something of that effect, because we have on request. We have, but 99% of the time we are giving you a completely the plant meeting microbials without that. And when we did our research that we will talk about later, part of the most important thing to the researchers was, could we get consistency within a 10% variance on all of our cannabinoid profiles? Yes. And could we do it again and again and again? Yes. Can we have microbials without tampering with terpene profiles? Yes, we can do that. So it matters for sort of all of those pieces, why the process to you as a consumer might make a difference in the long run. Now, these things are more time consuming. They're more labor intensive. Like, for example, our plants have literally hands on them every single day. This is not, we turn on the tap, we go in and we do training. We know what stressors the plant needs as well. It's not like it's a it's a completely smooth ride for the plant to do well. You need to, sort of put it through some paces, and all of this is quite labor intensive, but it works. And then when it comes to the dry, and this is one of the favorite parts of what we do, so the drying and the curing process, if you look at the reviews of our product, and I mean, this is patients, bud tenders, the most, hard and fast, don't like LPs, legacy people in the market. And I can think of two of those reviewers that said we were the first LP to deliver out of the container perfect moisture and perfect weight. Well, that happens because we hand pack, and our tolerance is not an under tolerance, it's an over tolerance. And to get that perfect weight, our staff literally sleep at the facility overnight in our dry cycle. And we take moisture readers every 20 minutes. And when it's ready, and we'll pack. So if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, there's a crew there at 2 o'clock in the morning to make sure that humidity is at the right level for it in the process. So our process is intense organically, it's intense environmental control wise, it's intense on the cure and the dry, because why spend 3 months doing something to rush the end when it's the most important, or one of the most important parts of the production. So that's what you get, is your starting material. And then our 2.0 products are beautiful as well. I mean, we use that flower. We use true to flower expression in our concentrate. So if you like high C's, or you like Ghost Train Haze, or if that's then you have one of the vapes, you're having a true to flower vape. We didn't take 15 different trims and put them together. It's a true to flower vape. When we do our oils, it's the same thing. It's the expression of the process. We also do a cold trap. So we do a solventless extraction of the terpenes. And why that matters is that if you use ethanol, or you flush things through, you're going to sort of diminish the expression of the terpenes and in the product. So we do a solventless extraction, we do supercritical CO2, and that would underline our oils and our vape products. But it all starts with that beautiful flower, and that is sort of the building block of everything that we do.
So that's a perfect segue, because that's actually what I want to talk about. I want to talk about, for people who aren't familiar with Aqualitas, for people who haven't heard about how you do things. Obviously, this is an extremely thorough and extremely interesting, discussion around organic, because I think even as a patient myself over the last 4 years, it's like, yeah, organic's probably good, but I couldn't tell you why it should matter to me until you've kind of walked us through that. So let's talk a little bit about what those products are. What do you have currently? And can you talk about, we all love to get the scoop on upcoming things or things that you're thinking about. Can you talk about those too?
Absolutely. So we have a genetic library of over 70 cultivars, and we currently have about 12 cultivars that are in production, but usually only 3 to 5 that are in market at any given time. And so we have 2 out of the ones that are in the marketplace most commonly. We have 3 our Ghost Train Haze, or high C's product in the recreational market. That's a high THC. It terpenoline, osamine, myrcene, beautiful, very dense buds, very lemony kind of smell to it. And what's interesting about our products is that we had, again, I always go to the reviews, because that's really, but it was on Lift & Co, it was 100% rebuy. And when it came to, the top THC products in Canada, High C's Ghost Train Haze was number 2. Its bookend, which I'm equally, and I love, equally proud of, is our Ebb and Flow. And so when Grow Up did their magazine article on moms and cannabis, pleasantly surprised to open that up and see Ebb and Flow was featured. And that's our even blend. And it's about a 610, and beautiful flower, nice bud construction. And again, that's sort of that even balance. And then we have what we call sort of our mid-range, because we wanted to have obviously the blend. We have the mid-range, and it was a white shark. And that, if you are into sort of more of the citrusy, pineapple-y, you like the mouthfeel of cannabis more than anything else, that's the product, for you. And then we have a high CBD Charlotte's Angel, which is it's a almost total CBD, under 1% THC. So those were what I would call our foundational flowers, although we have many over 20%, and we have some in the middle there as well. And I know like the Skittles is going to be is on our medical platform at the plant as well. And then we have our oil. So we have an even balanced oil, we have a high THC, and we have a high CBD oil, all using organic sunflower oil as a carrier, very stable carrier. It's also very good for sort of gut health. It doesn't have a lot of the side effects that some people report with some of the other carriers. We looked very carefully as to what carrier we would use, and that was the one that we landed on. It has a nice taste profile as well. It's not like that grassy. It's a kind of a clean presentation. And then we have 3 beautiful vapes, also sort of carrying on from the legacy of those flowers, having a balanced, having obviously the high C's and the anchor, which is one is a sativa, one is an indica, and then the other is the balanced. And in our coming soon, category, we have products. We do have a chew or a gummy that it will be our next product to market. We're actually working closely with a member of your SheCann community on a topical. So that is a potential that we should have in the marketplace, we hope, at some point soon. We've had discussions around suppositories as a possible product offering. We had been working with a company in the US about a potential around a transdermal patch. The path to market for that is a little bit longer because there are some other licenses, at least we think we need to have or should have to have that type of product work in its intended form as a medical device and as an application for that. And we also have some beautiful rosin coming out, and it's already made. So we're in sort of just some testing and R&D development. But that and the gummy that'll probably come out before the gummy. But it's a beautiful looking product that everybody's quite excited about. And of course, its parentage is coming from high C's. So nice concentration. The company. It's funny. We had another review of a company that does presses, and they press a lot of LP product, and they were amazed when they pressed ours, not only because of the color, but it actually didn't bleed away from the press because it was so dense. The density of the flower was, so the concentration and the potency, the yield is really good so far. So we're excited about that. And we did have we had a listing, but it's been delayed, but for a kombucha, a CBD kombucha as well. And that would probably be the last thing to get across the finish line. We know that the beverage category is, it's there, but there's some kinks that need to be sort of worked out with that. And then secondary to our product development, as I say, we do have a sensory panel under our research license, which allows us to test all these products. So when we release a product, we don't just release it on the COA, we also release it on a standard of quality that it meets the promise of the batch before. So it's not just, okay, does it have the numbers, but also does it feel the same? Does it look the same? Does it taste the same? And sort of it's a go, no go concept on the sensory side for release. But there's also the sensory side and the product development as we go along to say, okay, what do we need to tweak in the recipe? How do we fix this? How do we make it better? And all of that exercise of continuous improvement on the product development side is there. We're also working, in relation to potential nanotechnology, and we've worked with encapsulation, and we had research grants to assist us with that at our lab at Acadia. So it's the product development's really fun, because we get to try out things, and then we get to sort of put them through the rigor. but yeah, that's what we've got on the go. That's what we've got coming up.
Well, I feel, and I know I'm not alone in this, I feel very special that we get to hear kind of what's coming down the pipeline because, as patients, like there's so many of these things that we've been asking for, we've been looking forward to, and, they're slow to market and with good reason sometimes. I mean, we've talked about the transdermal patch. You and I have had conversations around how potentially, valuable that will be, especially to medical patients. And, I also share your view that it's very important that the science be able to reinforce that that is an effective method of delivery and not just a Band-Aid with some gel on it.
Yeah.
So, that's a really important distinction. I think sometimes it's hard because we feel very frustrated with the pace of things on the patient side because, maybe this is a medicine that we've waited a very long time to get relief from anything, and here's cannabis and we want to consume it in every way that makes sense. And I really appreciate getting some insights into these things. I can say that in our house, and this is not pandering to you at all. You and I know this, and I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true, but Ghost Train Haze, both flower and the vape, um, that's the first time I've ever not shared my cannabis with my partner because I didn't want to. I mean, Ghost Train Haze is an exceptional product. I was very, very, very pleased with it. The balanced flower and vape. My partner eats, sleeps, and breathes ebb and flow as a vape, and he only stops to pause to consume it as flower. It is exceptional, and obviously I've had a lot of flower. I've had a lot of products over. It's an occupational hazard. I have to for science. I have to I have to do it. But I can say I can personally attest to that, and I think that it's important to talk about quality because we're financially sensitive as a community, right? So it's something that when we look at some of these products, it's like, yeah, that looks really great, but it's out of my price range. And I have experience, and I know I'm not the only one that when you're using a quality product, you need less. And I
Absolutely.
can say that's definitely been the case in my experience with, both the even blend and the high THC, the Ghost Train Haze. So I think it's important to understand that process because you know it's hard when you're income sensitive, and it becomes really challenging because you know what works, but at the same time you have a hesitation about trying something else that maybe potentially is more expensive. And I think it's interesting you touched on something. I did not know this until very, very recently after seeing a discussion on Twitter. Not everyone has a sensory does sensory testing. Not everybody touches that cannabis before it lands in the hands of a consumer.
That's right. I mean, actually, there's not a lot, and it's hard to know the exact number because I mean, we're not ones to press release a lot, so I mean, ours didn't go out there. But when we took a quick scan of of who is saying they have a license, I mean, it's not many. I mean, and if it's less than 10% of what I would call the 50-ish 2.0 all encompassing suite license holders that would be making those products. And when I say 50 something, I'm including, producers that have multiple licenses, but one company. So when you sort of condense it down to that, it's sort of, that of that group about, probably less than 10 would have a sensory license. And we applied for that like right at the get-go, like at the very beginning, before they even had the application process. So, we went to the reg and said, okay, what's the reg asking for? Well, that's what we'll submit because we didn't want to wait on it. So we've had that for almost concurrent with the issuing of our sales license. So we've actually had that before, and with 2.0 products being, going live. So we've been able to do that, but also just working in the research and wanting to have that kind of data was always important to us. So we were pursuing it before the reg changed under a dealer's license potential, but ultimately we've had that license for a while now.
Yeah, I think that's something worth that is something worth shouting from the rooftops because I know that there's been more than one time where I've gone, oh, does anyone know it looks like this? Like when I've opened
Yeah.
a jar of of cannabis. So I think knowing that it's passed through, sensory testing, that people have made sure that, yes, this is something we want to send out the door. This is going to be consistent because it's
Yeah.
medicine, and that is important. And, those reviews are hard won. And you and I both know that it's
Yeah.
no secret that the industry has its challenges, both on the regulatory and on the industry sides. Like it is a very challenging environment. So I think it's very interesting to kind of hear that those products you're talking about, both the ones that are out now and the ones that are coming, they are being very thoughtfully and consistently curated. And
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to your point on the price, and we've gotten that feedback as well, just need less of the product. But the other thing too is that, to assist with access, I mean, we do have compassionate pricing, and we do have, programs in place around that, to help to the extent that we can realistically. But yeah, no, for sure. I think that, that certainly is a piece.
so we talked about products, we talked about process. Let's talk about culture, because I think that this matters more to people than, maybe corporations understand sometimes. So I know it matters to you. I know it's one of the key pillars of what you've built, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the culture at Aqualitas and how you support your employees and who they are, and and how you really, make sure that they want to sleep overnight to get up 2 a.m. to, because it's that's an ask, right?
No, it is. And you know what? Part of it is that I would not ask anybody to do anything I wouldn't do myself. And I think that that's the beginning of the culture. And so I remember we had our first harvest, and, we thought, oh, it's going to go, within working hours. Guess what? It didn't. And, people stayed overnight, and, I stayed overnight and worked along with members of the management team, and we were all in it together. We stub our toes too. And so, when we have to come in on a Saturday and a Sunday for a big pack order, like, we're there, like, we're not, so those are the kinds of things, I think that matter. When COVID hit, and we're doing all the stuff at the plant, we were there. So part of it is that we're in it together. So that's part of creating the culture. And, just a little snapshot, and I remember sharing this with you. I mean, just last Friday, what does the culture look like at Aqualitas? Well, last Friday, we have a team that does an MS bike ride, together in Brooklyn, Nova Scotia, and we raise money for MS. We have our Mercy Beat newsletter that goes out, and it celebrates. We feature a person, in the company on that edition. We feature a fish story. So the last fish story was about Einstein, our really smart fish who can feed themselves from our feeder. We have, we talked about Pride, and we were celebrating, Pride in Nova Scotia right now. And then, after that, communication goes out with, and it's got our wins and the reviews, and just, feeling proud about being part of something. And then on that same day, you get a communication from, Anthony, who's our head of security, a Canadian Forces vet. And everybody, talk about feeling safe and secure in your environment, feel very safe and secure, but also sending, the COVID up brief to say, stop by my office if you need to pick up your COVID kits. We give all of our staff masks and gloves and sanitation stuff for them to take into the community with them, to have in their car, so that they're not just safe when they're at work, they're safe when they're outside of work, because that's part of who we are as a community. It's about having, a composition of self-disclosure in our workplace. 40% of our workplace are people that disclose as having disabilities. So, that's a big part of a wellness company, that you actually have the composition in your workforce. We have programs that we support for new Canadians. We have diversity for gender and for race and religion. We celebrate cultural events. We celebrate multiple festivities, not just Christian holidays. I mean, things like that. We to try to just create that culture of diversity and caring. We live in a rural community where access to a doctor's hard. So we make sure that we pay on our dime for having telemedicine available to our staff, so that they can access healthcare. Again, our wages, we pay a living wage. Those are all parts of the things that we do to support our company culture, so that people know that they're cared about. We make mistakes, and when we do, we try to say we're sorry. or we try to listen and do better next time. It's not it's not a standard of perfection. It's a standard of acceptance and learning. And I think that we've learned a lot from each other. And I love the passion where, when you walk into the office, I mean, the number of people that have come to visit our facility and they say, oh my God, like people are just so proud of their work. You can see it when they walk down the hallway. You can see it when they tour a room. Like it's incredible.
I get emotional about it because as a woman with a disability who works in the cannabis industry, to know that you have worked so hard to make sure that your values are the values of your physical community, but also the community you've served, as somebody who worked to champion others, to champion the vulnerable sector. It's extremely powerful. And I think that, culturally in Canada, we are paying very close attention to how humans treat other humans. It matters. It absolutely matters to me. I am going to vote with my wallet when I know that people make a living wage. I am going to make choices based on understanding, how people are being treated at work. Because we don't just begin and end our days with our jobs. And for people with disabilities, for people who are new to Canada, for people who are veterans, those things are even more important because they are whole people. And you are seeing them that way when they walk in your doors. And that is something that is, worth shouting from the rooftops. I really do believe that. It's not a PR play. It's not a way to bump stocks. It's not a way to get more investment. It's reality. It's what you've built. And I think it's so important to show people that it's possible to do it in a way that is so deliberate that it comes through right down to the cannabis when it lands, in my mailbox. And I think it's just every time you say something, I'm like, nope, Myrna didn't know that. Geez, Myrna, we only got an hour, Myrna. Like,
Sorry, yeah.
Stop doing so many good things, Myrna. We just I need you to do just slightly less.
Fair enough.
But in that vein, I'm now gonna ask you to talk about something that is very important to the SheCann community. I mean, 97% of our members have said that they would participate in either research or clinical studies and trials. We know we often feel like guinea pigs already. So I'd love for you to speak about this because this is something that often this is a best kept secret, certainly for Aqualitas in a lot of ways, and it is something that is extremely important to the future of medical cannabis.
So our research and development division is called Syndica Global Institute for Research, Cannabis Research and Development. Syndica being, of course, the combination of indica and sativa. So one of the things I love the most about my job is the R&D side. It's what I'm really excited about it. As a company, we've received over 14 research grants and awards for our research since inception, which is incredible for a company with our bandwidth. And it's a testament to our team because we have more scientific folks on our team and advising our team. We're also one of the few companies to export. So we've exported to the EU and to Israel, and we're doing research collaborations in that regard. So just a quick snapshot. Every one of our products, both our flower, our concentrates, and our oils, are all either in studies or are on their way to studies. And so we are doing work with our concentrates purifying product for clinical trials for chemo-induced nausea, MS spasticity, chronic pain, and PTSD. We are doing research with our oils for a preclinical study on restless leg syndrome. We have been invited by one of the largest organizations in the US that are going to be conducting the largest PTSD study in the history of the US to provide dry flower for a whole extract, so to open a master drug file for consideration of our flower in that study. And there's a handful of companies that are doing that, and so that's something that we're very excited to have been invited to do that. So we're working in pharmaceutical level, we're working in whole flower, we're working in full spectrum. So it's really exciting for us because we're doing every sort of element of this on what would be sort of the high incidence of correlation with success with cannabis medically and otherwise. We also are doing some work with neuropathic pain, which would be secondary to the MS study, but also to the chronic pain. So the neuropathic pain specifically, working with, and we're working with some really great companies. And while I can't disclose the names now, I think over time it's going to be self-evident, what those are going to be. So yeah, no, for us, research on the medical and the patient side is really exciting. We have a medical patient advisory board, again, one of the few in the country. We have researchers and clinicians and patient advocates and caregivers on that to help us inform what projects should we be involved in, what types of studies should we be working with. And say what I said earlier, I'm looking for that perfect sort of combination to do some Alzheimer's research as well. I think that even if it's in relation to hitting the highlights of appetite, anxiety, and restorative sleep, it's a lot better than Halidol or lorazepam and things that literally are chemical restraints. And I think that so to me, there's even just from the low risk profile, some of those things are very exciting to me personally, but also to our team, which is again, amazing scientists. And then we also do the cultivation research. And just got an email last night at 11 o'clock excitedly from our head of aquaponics, a woman. She just finished her master's in engineering, and she's working on her PhD, and she's got a horticulture degree, and she has a master's in aquaculture from University of Scotland. And I'm thinking like, wow, you don't have enough to do, kind of thing. So those are the kinds of things within our team. Like we're just really good capacity and amazing people.
That no wonder you don't sleep. Like really. I mean, how could you? It's exciting. And she sounds incredible. I think it's a perfect segue. Thank you, by the way. You're handing me lots of perfect segues today. So you're making it easy. Something that the community really wanted to hear from you on is the topic of women in cannabis leadership. It's no secret that when it comes to C-suite positions, there are not a lot of women in cannabis in Canada, in North America, really at all. And I'd like to hear your take on that because you are, to me, first and foremost, a good human, but you are also somebody that I look to, and I know I'm not the only one. I mean, I joke about the Myrna Gillis fan club. I actually said today that I'm just going to scrap SheCann altogether and just start the Myrna Gillis fan club. So sorry, everyone. I have other priorities now. And, I think it's important to touch on women in cannabis leadership. It is something that people want to hear. So I'd love to hear your take on that and, your experience and philosophy.
So, I mean, I think women in cannabis, or just women leadership in general, I think that the same types of issues can apply in virtually every element of women in leadership. So whether it's in government or whether it's in the C-suite or Fortune 500 companies or the cannabis industry, you have an underrepresentation, relative to education and population. So I think that sometimes people, step back and they say, well, it's a qualification issue. Well, that's absurd. Of course, it's not a qualification issue. I mean, there are very many women and in equal numbers to men that have the education and the experience to perform any of the roles that are in any sector out there, not just the cannabis industry, every single one. So the question is, why is the underrepresentation there? And really, that's the question. And I also think that we don't want to measure our success relative to a particular leadership style that may have a gender bias that's male, because I think that the second that we start to say, how do you compare relative to X, Y, or Z, which is kind of the simple way that people try to say, well, my success is relative to X or Y. And that's really never been my approach to leadership. It's never been by comparison to any measure but my own, to say what is it that I value and what is it that I want, and how do I surround myself with like-minded people to sort of bring each other up and to promote each other. It's not easy, and I mean there are certainly also some very overt bro elements to the cannabis culture, both from a over sexualization in sort of that's there in relation to promotion or thought processes. There is some sort of level of masculinity that isn't welcoming. Certainly I knew that the first time I went into the industry, and I was never a networker, and I was never one to be self-promotional in my law practice. It was all came just because of the work and referrals from my clients. So the first place I went was, I said, well, where am I going to go? And it was Women Grow. So I deliberately went to spaces and places to learn and to be less intimidated, quite frankly, about how to do things. And so I found those environments, and that was part of fostering that. And I also think that leadership, like for me, there's some very fundamental things that we need to bring to the table, and it doesn't matter what level of participation we want or where we want it. And there's a difference. I value competence over confidence. I value empathy over assertiveness or aggression. And I think that if and I value collaboration more than competition. And so I think that if you decide as a woman what is it that you want to build and how, but for me those were the things, sort of competence and empathy and collaboration were my leadership tools. And I never have confused leadership, by the way, with management, because I'm not a good manager. I'm not, but it's to have a vision, and it's to have an execution on that vision that also brings all the parts together, so that you can see the big picture, you see the strengths in your team, and you allow people to express their strengths and not stand in the way of them. And sometimes that's hard when you like to micromanage, which I have a tendency to try to do that a little bit. And so letting go in that leadership is really, really important. But the other part of it too is that I had amazing female leaders in my life, and I had an incredible mother, who worked outside of the home, was the first manager at Eaton's. I had a grandmother who was the first female tax collector. I had a sister that went to business school in 1974 when there were 6 women in her class, and went to law school in 78 when there was 15 or 20 women in her class. So I had really good foundational support for not feeling any limits. And I also look at my father. My father was the kind of guy that said, my daughters can do anything. I was, 6 years old. We had very spirited discussions. And I think Kim is on this perhaps. And those Atlantic political discussions are really quite formative. And when I was a kid, I was 6 years old. My father always said, well, what do you think, Myrna? And so I always thought that what I had to contribute had value. And I think that women in leadership positions have to never question that they have something of value to share. But I also think that we need to kind of set our own table. As a lawyer, I worked with all women my entire career. So it was a very natural extension for me to go to some of the best people I knew. And it just happened that they were women. And those women came into leadership positions in this company. And continue to be in leadership positions, and everything from cultivation right up to, like, every department has amazing representation. And so I think the best demonstration of leadership is that you pick your lane of what you believe, you support other women, but you support everyone, because in supporting everyone you support women, and also not being afraid to make a mistake, and not being afraid that people are watching, and that you might stumble and fall. So what? You get back up. There's nothing wrong with that. And not letting other people define your leadership relative to male leadership. You make your own, and be that.
I I'm speechless. Obviously, I look to you as somebody who is, is an example of really strong leadership, and I think it is because, you are so anchored to your values. Not just because you're a woman in a position, not for that reason, but for the fact that you are so anchored to empathy, to collaboration, and those things they're meaningful and they translate, I believe, into good business. And in the spirit of talking about good business, I teased this out a little bit for people today. I'm very excited, obviously, to be able to kind of co-announce this information to SheCann first, because this community loves to get the scoop. So I'm gonna lead off, and then I want you to kind of fill in the details. But I will say that very, very soon, and you can fill in the blanks, Aqualitas will be selling through medical cannabis by shoppers. So the products will be available when?
Imminently. So
Imminently. Yeah.
yes, I can tell you we shipped in on July 16th. So we're excited to get this across the finish line.
And I let's talk a little bit about this, because you're a very medical focused producer. You are, you also have a very strong recreational brand, which we didn't really touch on, and I think it is important because it bears repeating. The Aqualitas brand is also the Reef brand on the rec side, and it is doing very well and holding up for itself. But what was the intent of partnering with somebody like Medical Cannabis by Shoppers?
Oh, for us, it was such an easy decision to accept that opportunity, because we've been saying all along, what I like about the platform, number one, is it gives consumers choice. Medical consumers need choice, and that can involve multiple producers. And we know that early on it was really cumbersome and difficult to have that selection. So selection is absolutely number one, because that is patient focused. The other is that as much as I love, the interaction that we have with clients in our medical platform, there is the benefit of having, the credibility and the credentials of pharmacists, because people with disabilities, people that are taking medical cannabis, generally take other medications. And I never understood why somehow this was an outlier that didn't require any thought about interaction with other things that people were taking. And wellness is a really holistic approach. And so it's not just the things that you put into your body. You need the education about that and understand how it interacts with other things. And so I love that those two elements are available for people. And so that, and also we get, this is another exciting thing, and I don't even know if I've had a chance to tell you this, but we're also going to participate in some research with shoppers as well, and put forward some things. So we're hoping that we're part of that community, contributing to the traceability and other opportunities that might be there. So that's exciting for us. But and I think so those are the main reasons that we're very pleased to be amongst the companies that are there. I think we might be one of the few private companies that are there as well. But I think it speaks to the quality and our reputation of in relation to the products that are out in the marketplace. And Reef, you know what? Really proud of Reef as a recreational brand. I think it stays true to the elements of values and vision and sustainability and organic that are important to recreational consumers as well. And we know that medical patients, for convenience from time to time, also drop into the stores and the retail level, and it's nice to be able to know that the products are there and available too.
I completely agree with that. And to speak to the Medical Cannabis by Shoppers opportunity, I think what I'm most excited about is the fact that this will bring Aqualitas products to so many more patients who maybe hadn't heard of you. And I do believe it's an incredible alignment, because you have a very medically focused, obviously Shoppers is solely focused on medical, and they're focused on the future of medical cannabis aspect. And you're right, it is medicine, and having that pharmacy oversight, having that extra step, in terms of continuity of care is extremely meaningful, not only to us now, but also, as things evolve. And I think that, Aqualitas is kind of, this East Coast story worth telling. And I'm really, really excited and happy for you. And I think shoppers is going to benefit from having a quality, organic product that has been so thoughtfully and meaningfully researched and put out to the world. So I'm very excited. I think it's going to be great. I can tell you by the comments on the Facebook Live that there are a lot of excited people. So, and Kim did say, Kim is on, and Kim did say that her dad used to ask her what she thought too. So that it's no secret in SheCann that I have a very, very large soft spot for our East Coast members, and some of the strongest, most compassionate, and funniest women.
It's a spirited group. It's a very spirited group.
Yeah. Truly, my best friends, colleagues, to you, to Kim, to Kathleen, who's in our group. So many of our members who are just incredible, incredible maritime women. So. It's a pleasure to be able to connect with you tonight and to, boost the signal for so much of what you've done and what you're doing and where you're going. Because, I believe in good humans, and I believe in good work, and I believe in boosting the signal wherever I can. So we have always been agnostic. We've never, aligned with a brand or clinic or licensed producer. It's always been about, constructive, collaborative feedback. And I can tell, this community tonight that, long before you were ever selling a thing, you were asking me what people thought, and you were telling me how important the work that we do in SheCann is. So this is a relationship that is based on, I think, mutual respect, and also, some fangirling that happens on my end quite frequently, but that's fine. It's fine. That's a whole other, what, I'll put together a clip show. I'll have it at the inaugural Myrna fan club, like we're going to get a piñata. It'll drop from the ceiling. It'll be just you holding one of the fish. Like these are all my marketing ideas for you that are not compliant. It's still compliant. I think we can make it compliant. So
listen, we're definitely going to do the fish stories, feature a fish. It's very it's all about process. So it's all good.
I do love the fish stories, and I want to make sure people know where to find you. Obviously, we've talked about the fact that you will be available on Shoppers, but your home is aqualitas.ca, and people can go there and see the products that we've talked about, and they can find out a little bit more about the company. And this video will be available on all our platforms because we want to make sure that we do shout it from the rooftops, because not because you asked, but because I make you. So it's really important to us to do that. And I really just sincerely want to thank you for taking the time. Your time is extremely valuable, and you invest it very wisely. And whether that's, being, all hands on deck in the middle of the night to make sure that cannabis is perfectly cured, or, connecting with patients and with researchers, taking the time to speak with us is really important, and it's very much valued. So thank you, Myrna.
Oh, look, thank you, and thank you to the SheCann community for for your support as well. It's you have no idea. It's very touching for me too. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And for anybody who missed the beginning of this, the replay will be available almost immediately after we're done here. So we're going to sign off. I'm going to probably go rummage and find some cannabis of my own.
Very good.
And I take good care to everyone, and most of all, thank you to you, Myrna.
Thank you very much, Ashley. As always, a pleasure.